Welcome to Heart Home Community's most recent Baldwinsville Community Update. I'm your host, Shelley Hoffman. Hey everybody, it's Shelley Hoffman and Brian May. And give me 1 second because I think our sound is down, Brian.
Oh.
People can probably hear us, but I want to make sure we can hear us talking as well. So how are you doing today?
Excellent. Glad to be back.
Yes, I don't talk to Brian as much as I talk to some of the other people, so I'm always interested to catch up and see what's going on with the county when we do.
Yeah.
So we just to show people what Brian does in the community, we actually just left a coffee talk at the new Auto Express on Downer Street. So if you haven't been there yet, we got a tour, which is pretty cool.
Cool place. Right here in our backyards. Mm-hmm. Easy oil changes. The prices look good. And a local owner, which is nice because there's a little more commitment necessarily than some of the other options we have these days.
Yeah. So normally we start at 10, but we're later today because we decided to take the opportunity and hang out with some Beeville people. So
absolutely.
So what's been going on, Brian?
Well, I think the first news is that it's the dreaded campaign season again. After the problem with being a county legislator is that you run. And then 2 years later, you run again. Mm-hmm. And you don't run 2 years later. A year after you're elected, you have to decide whether to run again. And usually it's the powers that be, the political people. Yeah. They want to know if you're running again. So I made, and I've shared this with several people, I made the decision. I was unsure if I was going to run again, but I decided that this will be my last term. 99.9% sure this will be my last term.
You never 100%. So if
you can't be.
Then yeah.
You can't, nobody's got a crystal ball and who knows what happens.
Do you mind sharing why? I mean, is it just time to move on? Do you have other things you're working on?
Yeah, or? I mean, it's always, it's a very demanding job. And just being a rank and file legislator is a very demanding job. If you have committee leadership, if you're part of the leadership equation, which, I have the Ways and Means Committee of the legislature. I chair that committee. That's the most demanding. The buck stops there before anything goes to the floor, financially or major policy or personnel related. It's an incredibly demanding job. The entire budget process runs through that committee. And I have a professional career. So, and a big family. So, that I want to devote as much time to as I possibly can. My kids are still all in school. My youngest two are still playing ball in college. And it's always my goal, even though one is very far away and the other one is out of town playing. I try to catch literally every game I possibly can and things like that. That's important to me. It's also important to me. And again, back to the leadership thing. I'm not just the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is honestly the hardest job on the ledge. I'm also the majority leader at the legislature, which puts a lot of burden on process and the thing I like the least, which is politics. I don't like that. I'm the majority leader because the Republicans have the majority at the legislature. So I'm the sort of team captain of the Republican members of the legislature, and that is an incredible amount of responsibility as well. It also has procedural responsibility. So,
well, since I met you, you've been majority leader. So that means if you decide not to run again, then your spot needs to be filled. And then somebody else would also have to step in and be majority leader.
And you're taking me right where I was going, which is there's a succession issue, and there needs to be a succession goal. So by kind of laying this out for everybody, that gives us a chance to figure out, okay, whether the Republicans are in the minority or the majority in the future, that doesn't matter. Somebody needs to lead the team. All right. Who's going to emerge to do that? Our chairman, our new chair, has announced that he is not running again.
Okay.
Someone needs to chair the legislature. 4 of the 6 Democratic members of the legislature are not running again. So there's all kinds of things to be settled out. And again, it's campaign season. So, this is the last term I'm pursuing. Whether or not I'm elected is up to all of our good friends out there. But so it's just, the focus is succession. The focus is transition. And again, The reason it's 99.9%
You just never know.
certain is because I just don't know what the future holds. But you know, and I think the last thing I mentioned was a demanding job. I want to see if I can, you know, take a good hard run at the last part of my working career and make sure I'm doing the most for my family.
Yeah,
during
well,
that time.
I can definitely relate
Yeah.
to that. So,
Yeah.
but
So yeah, so exciting times. Here we go again, you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm selfishly sitting here thinking, well, how many more interviews do I get to do with Brian before he just disappears? I'll just have to find another reason.
I'll
to
still
talk to
come
you.
in, but we'll have to talk about banking after that.
That works
But,
too.
yeah.
So what's been going on at the county?
Okay, so today is the day after probably one of the more challenging days I've ever had on the legislature.
Why is
And you know, the first reason for that is that is news that my predecessor, a great Beeville person and friend, father, public servant, Rich Lesniak, former legislator Rich Lesniak, passed away on Sunday. Yeah, and you know, he was very sad, great guy for this community, totally committed in all kinds of different ways, from town government to and through the ledge. He was also majority leader at the ledge, so it's, you know, you could say one could say I followed in Rich's footsteps in a lot of different ways. And again, it's just a man that I had a tremendous amount of respect for, and I'm going to miss. So that happened at the beginning of the week. Yesterday, the legislature took on the very heavy topic of the future of Jamesville Penitentiary as we know it. And to sort of set up the conversation, maybe a little background. And the reason I mentioned Rich is because when I took this job, there were two things Rich told me going in. This is over 10 years ago. He said, one, we got to do something about Jamesville. And what he was referring to, and this is, you know, government is almost all union work except for the higher level people in management. And there are different unions fulfilling different jobs. And Onondaga County is, and this goes back as far as Rich and I having this conversation, we had two separate unions doing largely the same work at two different jail facilities, the Onondaga County Justice Center downtown, and then Jamesville Correctional Facility in Jamesville. The breakdown between those two facilities was originally the nature of the inmates. So pre-sentence inmates were housed at Jamesville. Sentenced inmates less than 1 year were housed. I'm sorry, pre-sentence inmates were at the Justice Center downtown. Jamesville, sentenced inmates who have a sentence of less than 1 year. Okay. Again, but again, you've got these incarcerated individuals at both facilities, and you've got corrections officers or custody deputies largely doing the same work. Different nature and types of inmates. I will grant everyone that it's a different environment. It's different at the Justice Center. People are coming off the street and they're incarcerated from there. When they're coming off the street, they could be coming off of alcohol or drug dependencies. They could be coming in with maybe mental health issues that need to be sorted, vetted out, or those actual inmates need to be protected from themselves.
Gotcha.
That kind of stuff. Sentenced inmates, it's a little bit of a different environment. They know what their future holds. They know they need to do their time. They've been through that early post-arrest arraignment, trial, sentencing process, and their needs as an inmate are well established at that point. Okay. But we were the last of three of Onondaga. We're among, I think it's three of Onondaga County, or I'm sorry, of the counties in New York that have two separate unions and make this distinction within the county's ability to incarcerate people. That's my conversation with Rich
10 years
10
ago.
years ago.
10 years ago.
And about a year ago, I'll backtrack even further. COVID happened 3 years ago. Bail reform happened around the same time. Bail reform stopped, and we see it in the news every day. The number of people arrested okay, and incarcerated for crimes has gone down dramatically. And as a result, there just aren't as many people in those jails. Backing up a little bit even further, the 16 to and 17-year-old inmates who were treated as adults for
Violent.
many crimes
Yeah.
were also removed from those two facilities. Okay, they are now housed at Hillbrook in Onondaga County. Okay, they have to be housed elsewhere. But again, fewer people being arrested. Oh, and then by the way, marijuana became legal in New York State. So
Yep.
people aren't being arrested for possession of marijuana as they have before.
Yeah.
And with the criminal justice reform and the bail reform that's taken place, law enforcement and the judges have been rendered, I don't want to say powerless, but their ability to incarcerate people that need to be incarcerated is greatly diminished. Judges lost the discretion at the bench to decide who should be for the benefit and safety of the public. Bottom line is there's fewer people incarcerated. So there are fewer sentenced people for the reasons I mentioned, and there are fewer people that are actually being held on for arraignment or sentencing or trial rather. So and the numbers are such that those two populations could come together. The data supports that.
Okay. So can I just ask a question
please,
where you're going?
Please.
So you have two separate places and they could come together, but if you have two separate unions at those places, wouldn't that make it harder for them to come together?
Virtually impossible.
Right.
Because that work, there's a collective bargaining agreement for the work defined by each group, and you can't. So about a year ago, and I'm using that number, it's a vague number. It could have been 6 months ago. It could have been 12 months ago. I just don't remember when. Sheriff Conway, the prior sheriff, came in and he, in a formal capacity, told, I think it was in my Ways and Means Committee meeting, came in and told us, I'm going to merge Jamesville and the workforces of Jamesville and the Justice Center. He also explained why. And in very simple terms, just to kind of punctuate what I just said, he said, I can move inmates from one facility to the other. The law and the regulations allow for that. The problem is the union agreements don't allow me. The collective bargaining agreements do not allow me to move employees from facility to facility. So again, backing up for more background, society has changed. Unfortunately, the coveted job of being a law enforcement officer in any capacity is no longer in favor. And the numbers of people signing up to take the civil service exam to be a police officer or some sort of corrections officer or custody deputy
has gone down.
It's almost non-existent. And it's sad. And this is something that Sheriff Conway has. But again, remember, society has changed in the past few years. That's a whole different topic. But that's where things are. Why would someone want to do that unless they were really just born, wired, made, put on this earth to do that, to do that noble task?
Right.
And unfortunately, that's where we are. So we've got a incredible shortage of workers at the Justice Center, causing 69 lockdowns in 2022.
Wow.
When lockdowns happen, civil liberties get lost.
Mm-hmm.
And these folks aren't losing these civil liberties because of behavior. They're losing civil liberties because we don't have, the Onondaga County doesn't have the personnel to to staff the jail in a way that they can access religious services, access educational services, access healthcare, a speedy arraignment and trial.
Right.
Okay. Because transportation resources are missing. So that's a really serious thing. Conversely, we have an adequate staff and a even more substantially reduced inmate population at the Justice Center or at Jamesville. And so we've got the people, but we don't have the inmates. And some of the inmates have been crossed over and moved, and Sheriff Shelley, our new sheriff, has come in and done an admirable job putting Band-Aids on all of these problems and trying to fix it and trying to prove that he can fix it. But the problem is these fixes, and I'm just going to share my personal opinion and that of my caucus. I can't speak for anyone else. It's felt that those fixes are the sustainability of those fixes are greatly in question because it involves people from other unions doing work for other unions to fill needs. And that only lasts as long as people get along.
Right.
And as soon as something goes awry in this equation, we're going to have a problem. So,
is it what needed to be done just in for the now while we figure out other things, or?
This is a problem that's been emerging.
Gotcha.
I think these problems, they could be temporary. They could be long-term. It's really hard to say. Criminal justice and bail reform may get changed. They're even talking about it in Albany right now, but we don't know what the outcome is. We know where everybody stands on it already because of the way they voted and what they've kind of, the issues that they've dug in on in Albany. So I don't have a good feeling that there will be changes that amount to a material impact on our jails. And I don't even profess to know what the right or wrong answer would be. So, bringing it to our modern situation right now and the decision we have to make, we the Onondaga County, and forgive me, I don't remember who the letters were attached to. The lawyers are going to care about that a lot, but I don't. The county received a letter from a group, Indigent Defense Council of New York or something like that. They were a major driver or plaintiff in a lawsuit that the county lost back in 2015. And the threat in that letter was that, or the implication of that letter was they were going to open that lawsuit again over expressed and detailed concerns having to do with the civil liberties lost that I just mentioned.
Right.
We got our butts handed to us in that lawsuit, and it cost taxpayers millions of dollars to fix. And frankly, it was something we had to fix because it was very apparent to us that this is the expectation moving forward, and we needed. It had to do with the guarantee of counsel for those who can't pay for it.
Gotcha.
Just to keep that simple.
Yeah.
Not to diminish it, but to keep it simple. And that was something we needed to do, but that was to the tune of millions of dollars. The threat of that, and we had no argument in that case, speaking honestly. So the threat of reopening that settlement is something that everybody takes very seriously, beginning with the county executive. And here's how the legislature works. It's an expression, someone else's expression, but I love it. The county exec proposes. This is how it runs. The county exec proposes, the legislature disposes. That's how the co-equal branches work. So the county executive and the prior sheriff, because of this letter, and the timing just absolutely sucked. And I'm going to say that right now. It was right after the election. So we went from a Republican sheriff to a Democrat sheriff. The letter arrives maybe a week or two after the election. And both the county executive and the sheriff said, you know what, we have to do something about this right now. And this was interpreted from and I won't get into the politics, but it was interpreted politically as, hey, this new sheriff is going to get his chops busted at every single term. That's not true, and I'll tell you why in a second, but that's why that's the timing, yeah. Right? Immediately the incoming sheriff, his back is naturally against the wall. He wants an opportunity to fix it, even though it's something that we have been dealing with for a long time, and recognize that it's just kind of it can be better. Okay. We've known it can be better for a long time. He engaged the New York State Commission on Corrections. New York State Commission on Corrections came to the legislature in early December, not the legislature, the county in early December.
Okay.
And with a list of demands and considerations that we needed to meet if we were to proceed. So now we get this spark from indigent defense, and then we get a response because the sheriff is, I'm going to call it fighting back. I mean, that's what it was. Fighting back on the issue that's in front of us. And that just raised the stakes for everyone. So from a legislative standpoint, when the administration, the prior sheriff, they wanted us to do this in a week to make the declaration that we were going to do this. Well, it wasn't that simple. And Chairman Rowley and I decided we're going to have a thorough legislative process. We said no to the request to do this very quickly. We gave it the month of January and the remainder of December for people to learn about this, for people to talk and figure some things out very, very thoroughly. We did an unprecedented thing. We sent it to 3 legislative committees for vetting. We've got a jail facility. It went to our facilities management committee. This is a public safety issue. It went to our public safety committee. This is a financial and personnel roster issue. It went to Ways and Means.
Gotcha.
And then ultimately it went to the floor yesterday. Incredibly contentious conversations, incredibly detailed conversations. I'm actually proud of the way this was all vetted out. At the end of the day, there was a very compelling amount of data supplied by the proposer, the administration, that said, here are all the things that are happening. They're wrong. We have to fix them. Here's how we can fix them. The proposal, very simply, was we take this able-bodied workforce at Jamesville, we combine it with the able-bodied workforce at the Justice Center, and all of a sudden, we've got a able-bodied, complete, turnkey workforce to meet all of the, and this is important, moral and legal obligations the county has with respect to incarcerated individuals. And that's what happened. So the mechanics of it are that everyone at Jamesville has their job abolished. In the same resolution that abolishes the job, positions are created at the Justice Center.
Gotcha.
An age-old argument between these two workforces has been, why do the James people make so much less than the folks at the Justice Center? Well, by bringing them into that collective bargaining unit, they all automatically get raises. Okay? Some of the raises substantial, like $10,000 a year. And so everybody keeps a job. Everybody gets a job. If there are any jobs over there that were unrelated to the corrections process, they were pulled into other areas of the county, like the facility management area of county government. And there are some counselors and things like that. Everybody kept their job. They just report to a different place every day. And I don't mean just report like I'm minimizing it. It's different. It's a disruption. It is not a perfect solution. The folks from the correctional facility are losing nothing in the way of pension, credit, rank. They're being moved into appropriate places on the roster. But because they're going into a new union, the union is not giving them some seniority. That's the one thing we can't control. We can only implore them to do what would be nice.
I was wondering about that just because I know a little bit about unions. Being from Pittsburgh originally, there were still a lot of unions. My dad was in a union, and seniority is something that people care about a lot of times in the union. So I was wondering how that would work when they came.
Yeah, that's the one downside. And I don't. As a practice, I do not discuss union issues.
Yeah, no.
And the details of them, because I don't want anyone to interpret me having an opinion when I have no legal authority to have an opinion. I have no legal authority to negotiate. Legislature is not part of it. It's the administration of county government. But I will say that there are contractual provisions on one side that I think and I hope are going to create a much better scenario than these folks anticipate. And here's where I go off the rails a little bit.
Okay.
This was a very emotional issue. This was the factors, the influencers in all this process. It's emotional. People's lives are going to be disrupted. Nobody's dismissing the seriousness of that. But everybody gets a raise. I told you what the things are. And that's not good enough. I realize that. it's political. It's incredibly political. And you know, I beg my members to not only sweep the political stuff aside, but the union stuff aside as well, because the unions rally up in these circumstances, and I don't blame them. You know, that's what they do, and they're going to fight. Okay, they're going to fight, and so for political reasons, for emotional reasons, power struggle between people at the top, the poor people who work at Janesville who are going to be affected by this, I think we're really caught in the middle. Excuse me, almost as much as the legislature was, because, you know, we have to dispose. When it gets put on our lap, we have to deal with it. Again, nobody liked the timing, but this is really tough on those folks. I think, I hope, I pray, honestly, that it's going to be better than they think. Again, I'm not making this okay, but a loss of seniority is less of a bitter pill with an increase in pay and benefits.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, tough issue, but starting today, not today, but when this takes effect, we'll have an able-bodied workforce to do it. Now, the sheriff is going to push back. He's independently elected. It's his right, and I respect that all day long. He's going to push back on this legislative finding, but the legislature has weighed in. And we weighed in, again, with a personnel resolution that did everything I explained. Another resolution that spelled out the logistics. And it's the logistics he takes issues with. We don't need to go into that, but there's the logistics. Then there's a local law that changes everything that was done in that personnel resolution to reflect that we're going to be operating with custody deputies moving forward, not corrections officers as defined by the prior contract. And then the last thing we did, and I think this is one of the most relevant things, and the emotions are so high, no one's thinking this way, but out of consideration for the only argument the sheriff had, and all those who supported him and all those who are resisting this change, is we need more time to figure this out. There's been a lot of time to figure this out. I mentioned the fact that this was mentioned to me 10 years ago for a very good reason. I mentioned the fact that the sheriff made this declaration almost a year ago. I mentioned that it had gone too far at the point we get a letter from Indigent Defense. Now it's really going too far when the stakes get raised by pressure from New York State Commission on Corrections. All of that being said, this was the time to deal with it. It wasn't a rush process. It was a thorough process, one of the most thorough I've been involved in, to be honest with you. And at the point we cast a vote yesterday, there was nothing else to learn. It was just making a decision. And the media, and believe me, the media went crazy with this yesterday. The number one question is, why couldn't you just give the sheriff more time? And I've already explained that to you, and it just didn't hold up against the data, the facts, the reason why we're doing what we do. But we're also realists. And what we did, we were assured that, hey, Janesville's not going anywhere. We still own the facility and all this, and we're going to quote unquote mothball it. That was said to us in a variety of different meetings. That's never good enough for me. Okay. In fact, that's a trigger for me to say, okay, well, if that's the intent, we're going to take legislative action to ensure that while we're working out the execution of everything that we just committed to, Janesville, there's a moratorium on the decertification of Janesville as a jail, on any disposition of the property, because the rumor mills became so intense that some of the things being said by people out there in the community, and when I say in the community, the only people talking about this were folks that are connected and or affected directly or indirectly.
Makes sense.
Was that there was some potential profiteering or development, just I get
Right.
it, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm not going to say they were ridiculous, but they're ridiculous. They are ridiculous. You know, it's, you know, and the legislature, specifically my team, and that resolution was sponsored by me, saying, no, we're going to put a moratorium on this. It's a renewable 12-month moratorium. So whatever happens, because I have every indication that the sheriff's not going to cooperate or push back every chance he gets, and that's his prerogative. He is independently elected. I respect that all day long. This community, our county, made him sheriff of Onondaga County. He can do what he wants. We stayed within our lane. We made the decision with regard to the two workforces. If criminal justice reform happens again, and we have an inmate population spike, presuming this plan is executed on and implemented, it has to be. We can pivot and we can change, and we can be wrong. And I'm never afraid to be wrong. No one should be afraid to be wrong in these leadership positions. So if things change, we built in a little bit of a safety net to make sure that we can change back. But the beauty of this is when we change back, the new Onondaga County Sheriff is going to have one workforce that he can use to manage both facilities. And that's the end game. That's all we did yesterday. We didn't close Jamesville. We did effectively, when this is implemented, shut it down. Right. But it's a difference. There's a difference.
The big picture is different now. And
yeah.
And again, I'm not simplifying, because first off, I would never want to do what you do, and you gave a lot of information this time period. But
sorry it was so detailed. It's probably not of interest to everybody out there, but it was
I was interested.
Okay, so good.
If nothing else, you and I had a good conversation.
Yeah.
But what I always try and wrap it up, because maybe people come in halfway through, they listen to the beginning, they catch the end. But when we started this, it was 10 years ago, and the big issue was the two facilities, two unions, and now you have one facility, one union, but the option to use another facility, but one union.
Yeah,
right?
And the option to farm out inmates. There's a complete plan to make this work, and if the top lawyer of Onondaga County says something is a threat, we have to take that. If we receive a plan and a promise from the administration that this is what's going to happen, they've given us that plan in public record. It's more than a promise, and they need to deliver. Okay. And the sheriff who was elected, he's going to have to deliver in a way that's acceptable to him. It's his choice. We're all accountable to the voters and to the public, and we all take oaths of office. Mm-hmm. So his is different than ours, but we were very careful to stay in our lane on this decision. No one else is going to make this decision, can make this decision, but the legislature. And the sheriff can't make that decision. Only the legislature can make that decision about the personnel. That's what we did. And it was a tough day, but I think we did right by the taxpayers. I will say this. We received countless, and I say we, my team, received countless emails and phone calls from people. We only came up with, and when we could easily say into the couple hundreds, if not more, we could only identify one email from the general public that weighed in on this matter. And by the way, the one person that weighed in on from the general public seemed to get it and was in favor of it. Everyone else had a dog in the hunt, in that, so that offered a little bit of validation. But there's a lot of hard feelings after yesterday with a lot of people, and another reason why this has got to be it for me.
I was just going to ask you.
I'm bringing it all home. It's like a Seinfeld episode. I'm bringing it all home right now. This has got to be it for me.
I was just going to ask you.
One more term. That's it.
Do days like yesterday going to kind of solidify that that you're just, because we talk about this in any role, especially when it's like a volunteer type of a situation, whether it's government, whether it's volunteering in a local community. Eventually, it all takes a toll on you. It's big decisions, stuff like that. So that's why I was kind of curious when you're telling this. I had it in the back of my mind, like, is this weighing in? Because this is not the first time that Brian and I've talked where it was a big decision with a lot of emotions involved, and people feeling at the end of the day they probably did what was right, but doesn't necessarily make you feel good that you made everybody happy.
That's right? A great characterization of it. You did what's right. I know what we did was right. The data, it was a good decision, a practical decision, and a great long-term decision. But you still feel terrible about it after it's done, because people are affected. But I don't know, maybe one little quick.
Sure.
I was 3 months on the ledge with Ryan McMahon, Dave Knapp. Yeah, the three of us. And 3 months in, don't know my head from a hole in the ground, right? As far as that business goes. And one of the first things that come our way was closing a WIC office on the south side of Syracuse.
Wow.
And we had to lay off, fire, if you will, everybody that worked there. The community, the neighborhood was outraged. It's so important, right? What WIC does.
Yes.
But it was a grant funded office. And it was before we, the three people I just mentioned, said, we are never doing this again. We're building language into these grant funded programs. They only exist if there's grant money. And if there's no grant money, the program ends. But we had to make that decision on the floor of the legislature. And every single one of those people that lost their jobs, and a lot of the people who were served by that office, came in to testify before the ledge. People lost jobs, people lost services. And in that case, I mean, it's kind of life and death, motherhood.
What was I going to say? For
kind
moms.
Of issues.
Yep.
Yeah. And for children, of course, that was heavy. Cool part about that story is 6 months later, I find out every one of those people got jobs back in Onondaga County somewhere, somehow. But at the time, holy moly, that was just a horrible experience. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about that yesterday. We're not talking about 2008, before my time, or 9, when that county had to lay off 300 people because of the Great Recession. We're not even talking about COVID, where 9 people lost their jobs. Right.
Well, and if you remember when we were talking with COVID, there was a lot more people that everybody assumed was going to lose their jobs, right?
Correct. Yeah. So, I don't mean to diminish by saying it could have been worse, but boy, it could have been a lot worse. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that's my story. That's my update. It was a heck of a day yesterday. And, I still feel kind of lousy about it today. I feel good about the decision and lousy about the fact that people are affected. But when we take oaths of office, it holds us to different standards and expectations. And I'm proud of my team for standing up, the members of my team, because not everyone did, that stood up and did what, we felt was the difficult but right thing to do. And in the long run, I'm very confident everybody's going to be okay. I really am.
I am. I want to throw a personal thing in this because I talk to my kids and I talk to people in my business and stuff. But I keep going back in my head where this was a known problem 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I always say, if you don't take care of a problem in the time that you had to take care of it, it's like you're pushed to take care of it kind of at the last minute, which, not that I'm saying this is last minute, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like, hey, we'll come up with a solution. And then, you know what I mean? There's so many other things that come up. But
great point. And that's exactly the situation we're in. And it's frustrating because, again, it played into the whole union, political power play. And the thing that frustrates me most is that it's, at the end of the day, all these power people are fighting. Remember, the legislature's kind of called in to make a decision.
Yeah.
But all these power people are fighting and, against each other, blocking heads. And all these workers are
waiting.
They're just, it makes them, it puts them in a tough spot. Right. And that's unfortunate because a lot of their concerns just aren't true. A lot of their concerns were dispelled, but they didn't make it to them. So whatever, that's the job. And here we are. And like I said.
Yeah. Well, I always say I appreciate your time in this stories, but to me, it's getting it's your perspective. Obviously, somebody else could be watching this and have like a different perspective.
100%.
But at least it adds clarity to what's happening. And I feel, the piece that I'm going to miss, and hopefully whoever takes your role, if that 1% doesn't happen where you stay in the position, is the humanity that you bring to the decision. Like,
thank you.
The feelings and the thoughts and the understanding that, there's actual people that are affected by what you guys do.
Yeah. It wasn't an easy, I appreciate you bringing that up, because, and that's a trap for doing this too long too. There's people that do it for like 30 years and, you can see they not to knock them, but it becomes easier to make tough decisions over time because you've made a lot of them.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
and sometimes that dehumanizes the process. And it's always good to have new blood. I don't believe in term limits for 2-year terms of anything because you're always earning it.
Right.
Well,
and also if there's turnover every 2 years, you always have someone that has to. It takes a year to learn what you're doing.
You
At
get
least,
nothing done.
right?
You get nothing done.
Yep.
Nothing done. So, so this is I'll finish this term, and if I'm reelected, great. If I'm not, that's okay. I've done my time. But if I am reelected, that'll probably be it. Yeah. So, anyways.
Well, we have more time with Brian May anyway.
Yes, we do.
That's all I heard.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian. And
Thanks.
if people have questions, reach out to me. I'll get the questions to
Or
Brian.
me.
And
Me.
he's very much. I almost forget. He says all the time that his cell phone is out there. So don't forget that for sure. But all right, I will talk to everybody soon. Enjoy your day.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.